Supporters of net neutrality, argue that content will be prioritized, controlling the content of what you see on the net if net neutrality weren't passed. So can you talk about that, why that's not the case, why you're more worried about the providers of broadband service over the prioritization of content?
Well, I think the most important response to that is the tense that you use in framing the question, the tense that advocates use when they're talking about net neutrality. Will be prioritized, could be prioritized. The simple fact is that there is no paid prioritization today. There is no blocking of traffic today. Internet service providers, whatever their other faults, don't engage in some of the anti-competitive behaviors currently. And if you were able to see the 317-page order the FCC just passed, you would look in vain for any example of behavior like that. They talk about, could have an incentive to, or might have an incentive to in the future. And so it seems to me, from an FCC perspective, the very reason we regulate is to solve an existing systemic problem. If you're going to apply industry-wide rules, one would think there should be an industry-wide problem. And I think it's telling that there is no such problem that's identified by the FCC itself. And so in the wake of that, I think it's ridiculous for the FCC to suddenly say this marketplace is broken or could be broken in the future, so we're going to regulate against hypothetical harm. That's not the way we should do business, I think.
And one other thing, what are the real-world implications, consequences of classifying the internet as a Title II public utility?
There are numerous of them. I think number one, we are going to increase the amount that people pay for broadband, in part because of universal service taxes, also in part because reclassification of broadband companies as telecom companies subjects them to all kinds of state and local taxes. Just to give you one example, the District of Columbia taxes telecom providers at a certain rate and everybody else at a different rate. As a result of reclassification, some of these broadband companies are going to see an 11% increase immediately on the taxes they have to pay. That's 11% of gross receipts. That money gets paid by the consumers ultimately, so you're going to see higher prices. Number two, as I pointed out, fewer competitors. Some of the smaller ISPs are going to go out of business because they simply don't have the ability to comply. Number three, slower speeds. As I said, whether you're small or big, the more money you have to spend complying with regulations necessarily means you'll have less to invest in the network. Number four, we're going to see the government injecting itself to all aspects of how the internet works, which is only going to mire, essentially instead of the internet's operations being driven by technologists, by engineers, by innovators, it's now going to be driven by lawyers, politicians, and bureaucrats. Additionally, we're going to see less choice for consumers in terms of the service plans they're going to be allowed to have. The FCC document explicitly tees up things like T-Mobile's Music Freedom, which allows you to stream music free to your phone without it counting against your data caps. And it says that this could be a violation of the so-called Internet Conduct Rule, a net neutrality violation. Now the question I have is, do you trust 3 unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. to decide what wireless service plans are right for you? I certainly don't. I wouldn't trust myself with that. I think that American consumers should have the right to choose for themselves. And so those are just a few off the top of my head.
But so your position is that content prioritization or access is not a real threat?
It does not happen now. Everyone we've talked to said it will not happen in the future. Were it to happen, then there would be a question for various authorities to examine. But you never regulate to address hypothetical harms. You don't slap industry-wide regulations to address a problem that simply doesn't exist.